Webster's dictionary defines socialism as any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods, a system of society or group living in which there is no private property, a system or condition of society in which the means of production are owned and controlled by the state, and a stage of society in Marxist theory transitional between capitalism and communism, and distinguished by unequal distribution of goods and pay according to work done. Robert Owen started the idea of socialism in a small area of Indiana in 1825. He called this area New Harmony. He believed that a man's character was made for him, not by him. He believed that the idea of community-owned property and goods instead of individualism was the way for a sort of utopian society to exist. Engels, Friedrich Engels, was a German journalist and radical. He believed a great revolution was on the horizon and that it would begin in England. Working conditions in England at the time were very awful. He believed that history being on the workers' side, they should actively rebel against the capitalist system and realize that they were no longer victims to a capitalist society. Karl Marx was a theoretical thinker. He was friends with Engels back in Germany. He founded the idea of Marxism. Marxism ideas were centered around the idea that the workers created the goods, but that the capitalists were the ones keeping the bulk of the profits from the workers. Marx and Engels both believed that the workers needed to take the factories from the capitalists. But by the end of the 19th century, Marxist ideas were not becoming true. The workers were not becoming poor or revolting against capitalism, as Marx and Engels both thought would happen. What does this phrase mean? From according to his abilities to each according to his needs. Essentially what it means is that people get what they earn. At the time there was no private property, everything was shared in common, but it was all done in democratic fashion. The community would have group meetings where people were able to make their case for what they needed, and the community would decide what they needed to do to make sure those needs were met. There was a community store where everything was distributed. If you needed food, you went to the community to get it. You also had no personal clothing. Clothing was gathered up and distributed as needed. You may get a shirt that another member of the community had the week before you. Marx and Engels had a great influence on the mind of Vladimir Lenin. Lenin was considered as one of Russia's most prolific workaholics. He studied the works and ideas of Engels and Marx. He believed that Marxism had a place and that it was necessary that the workers revolt against capitalism in order to save his country of Russia. He decided that since the workers weren't going to start a revolution or revolt against the capitalist thinking and government on their own, that him and his colleagues would start it. In 1917, a revolution began in Russia. The Tsar at the time left the throne and a new, loose-knit government took over. Marx formed the Bolsheviks and stormed the government and took over on October 25, 1917. Under Lenin's rule, millions of non-followers of the revolution taking place were murdered. He believed that the existing human race was so rotten that killing them was progressive. He believed, like Engels, that by creating through education and regulation, you create a new, better being. Marx believed that a revolution would start in a more industrialized nation, when what actually happened was the revolution began in Russia. The main reason for this was because the revolution was more of an economic change under Lenin than it was under a social change. Social change under the ideas of Marxism just didn't occur overnight. Social change doesn't just happen overnight, it happens very slowly, very meticulously. Just looking at our own history as a country, you can see many examples such as slavery, women's movement, several civil liberties. It's a very slow process. One of the downsides to socialism was the command economy idea. Command economy, the government controls all means of productions. They completely take out the supply and demand and competition idea of a free market. What this does is this causes hardships to the individuals. Without a free market economy, goods and services can't be produced as consumers need them. The government controls how things are distributed. The main difference between unions and a labor movement and the Socialist Party in general is unions and labor are more concerned with the economic welfare of an entire group of workers where they control things. The Socialist political party movement, if you want to call it, is more about the economic and social change, whereas there's a community of people who are responsible for themselves instead of just economically. The idea of socialism has a lot of good qualities, a lot of good ideas built into it, but I do not think it will ever fully succeed in any society, especially in the United States. The main reason for this is one of the 10 principles of economy, which is the cost of something is what you give up to get it. We are, as citizens, individuals. We have our own way of doing things. We like our own things. We want to do our own thing. And the true definition of socialism just does not provide for that. The idea of socialism, the Heaven on Earth documentary was very informative. I thought it was a little long, but it did have a lot of information that it needed to cover. The idea of socialism, like I stated before, does have a lot of good ideas to it. But one thing that it doesn't, or what it does do, is it takes away a lot of the individual freedoms, and that is one of the greatest things that this country has, is our individualistic freedoms.